investigations here and at other places, and they all reveal the same thing of shocking cruelty and disgraceful conditions. And just over a year ago, a worker here was so upset by what he saw that he decided to expose Harlan with documented evidence and for the Sunday Times, and a full expose was run. And he told me that in his first week he witnessed a senior worker holding down a terrified dog with his knee whilst he shouted and punched it and shouted abuse at it. He also saw workers laughing and jeering as they shaved obscenities into the dog's fur and wrote cruel words on their body with felt tip pen. No support given for their underbody, and then they're just literally chucked back inside like inanimate objects, cartons or packages that have no feelings or emotions. Here they get 20 minutes exercise a week, and when I say exercise, I'm not talking about in a field or even in the fresh air. Females and the stud dogs, unlike the others, are kept here for their entire lives, which is until Harlan decide to kill them because they're not making the money anymore. The breeding females are kept in pitiful conditions, cramped cages, no nesting material, just that scrap of sawdust on the floor to soak up the urine. And Russell told me that when the workers go near them, they cower at the back of their pens or shake uncontrollably. They're expected to produce 9 litters in their lifetime from as young as 8 months old before they're killed. The donor dogs, again, are kept here for their entire lives. These pitiful dogs are kept in terribly cramped cages that they can barely move around in. In Russell's words, they move painfully, like very, very old dogs. And when they're taken to give blood, they stand with their heads hung down, seemingly in total despair, feeble bodies and broken minds, as a technician carelessly carries out yet another painful procedure on their permanently shaved, covered in puncture marks and bruised body, after which they're taken back to their cell until the next time. This is their life here. It's a living hell. And this is why we're here today, and we can never stop fighting for these animals. To look up what was actually happening to these animals in psychology, and it was just appalling. I saw cats that had their heads ripped open and had chips stuck into it just so that they could measure their brain. In this paper they say that animals have various licenses that they have to be given before they can be tested on and put through these kind of things, but that doesn't mean, no one in that class, let me get my words. Afterwards I went onto Facebook and I asked my fellow my fellow people in my course, what did you think about that lecture? None of them even thought about it, and they just said, oh well, I'm sure it's fine. There's legal regulations and everything. That must just make it okay. Nobody even looked what these regulations are. Who's judging what's okay?
At the beginning of their demonstration, there was no chanting or shouting. Protesters chose to stay quiet, leaving their banners and placards to speak volumes. Up to 100 protesters gathered outside the Harlan Research Laboratory in Witton, near Huntingdon, objecting to the breeding of beagles for medical research.
It's going on in secret, hidden from the public view, and it's going on relentlessly, day in, day out.
The dogs in there are no different from the dogs, in people's homes and their neighbours' homes.
These aren't special animals that don't feel pain or suffer. They're exactly the same as your dog or your cat, and they suffer, they really suffer.
We've been unable to speak to Harlan Laboratories, but the company says it's dedicated to the humane care of animals and conforms to strict rules and regulations. But these protesters want the site closed down.
Even as we're standing here now, there's many, many hundreds of dogs in there.
After their demonstration, protesters gave speeches before staging a march through St Ives Town Centre, hoping to spread their message and stop animal testing. Lauren Carter, Anglia News, Witton in Cambridgeshire.
for lethal experiments that are conducted in labs across the country. And it's called Harlan Interfauna. And it's one of 5 UK sites operated by the global Harlan business. And you should know about it because it's right on your doorstep.
Most of these dogs here in the UK are used for toxicology purposes, which means poisoning. They are harnessed and strapped down and forced to inhale highly toxic chemical fumes. They have their fur shaved off to reveal bare skin in which chemicals are rubbed until the skin is bleeding, raw and ulcerating. And they also have drugs dripped continuously into their bloodstream by IV infusions. These drugs and chemicals are applied at a level of 1,000 times the dose any normal human being would ever encounter under normal circumstances. And these dogs are given no pain relief and no symptom relief. They are just left to die a slow, drawn-out, agonising death. 90% of the drugs tested on the dogs this way never even go on to be made to be used in humans. But again, there are ways that we can effectively screen out and eliminate these drugs. Methods like nanodosing and microdosing, which are effective ways of eliminating those drugs that are not effective for human use. But of course, the vivisectors refuse to acknowledge these alternatives. They are not open and receptive to the modern day alternatives based on human medicine and science. Instead, they insist on continuing to use these flawed, traditional animal-based models, even though the alternatives are out there. All they need to do is mention the word cancer or AIDS and they get the go-ahead. That is bluff. That's not science, that is bluff. And they will continue to ignore the fact that there are deep and fundamental differences in the biology and the physiology of different species. They ignore all the drugs that in the past have proven to be safe and effective time and time again on animal after animal, yet on humans have had catastrophic results. And they ignore the 10,000 people who are killed every year from adverse drug reactions. You and I know the alternatives are out there, and we know that they are superior, and they're superior because they are based on human-based tissue and cells and modern, latest, cutting-edge technology. But the vivisectors insist on continuing to use animals. They don't question the fact that these models have not delivered results. They don't think, well, maybe there's a problem here, or we've reached a limitation of what they can offer us. And they look at alternatives. So UK government is not much better either. It makes all these empty pledges and promises and commitments to reduce the number of animal use and testing and use alternatives wherever possible. Yet on the other hand, the number of animals used and published by the Home Office year upon year consistently show an increase. That is hypocrisy and that is propaganda. What do the highest regulations in the world mean to the monkey who's had his head surgically opened up, electrodes inserted, and all this time denied his very basic access to fresh water? Here in the UK, we have this image about trying to be the world's leader in medical research. And I also want to mention this Freedom of Information Act, which came into force in 2005, supposedly to enable the public to have open transparency, access to information, and accountability for the money that their money is being spent on. Yet, of course, when it comes to animals, the scientists are protected, and they don't need to disclose or divulge any information. They're not even able to stand up and defend what they experiment and what they do. They cannot even take the challenges. Have no doubt that this is why we are here. And we will continue until there's a stop to this. And we have to do that because what is going on is too unacceptable. We also have to do it because if we don't do it, the dogs and the animals cannot do it for themselves.